Hi, my name is Ronald Stanley, and I am presenting with Andrew Matherus, and we're presenting for CS364 on interviews. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. First off, we're going to do a brief introduction on interviews. Interviews are one of the most common ways that we interact with one another and is an excellent technique for requirements elicitation. Interviews greatly depend on the strength of the questions. So, in an interview, it's simply a human conversation. So it can go a various different ways. It can go very well if good questions are asked, and it can go really poorly if you get off topic and poor questions are asked. So this is something we're going to pay attention to as we move forward. So we're going to go in and talk about structured interviews, unstructured interviews, and semi-structured interviews. So first off, in a structured interview, it is key to come to the conversation as the interviewer with predetermined and specific questions. Um, and this is what we've kind of gathered from our research within the article. Um, Having great questions are what makes a structured interview great. Uh, it is well planned out, and the right questions asked, a great experience can be had by the interviewer and interviewee. Structured interviews are not particularly good for exploring new ideas and kind of brainstorming because you really want to come to it with predetermined set questions. But structured interviews have been proven time and time again to be very rigorous and effective from research. So now we're going to go on and talk about unstructured interviews. So in unstructured interviews, they are very conversational in nature, often going back and forth between the interviewer and interviewee. It's more of a conversation and think of an ideas to talk to, more topic driven. So you're not going into it with a specific question list of 10 questions to ask, get 10 answers, and be done with. Um, so there is a risk in this method in that the interviewer may forget or neglect important topics that need to be addressed or handled within the interview. So it's great for kind of exploring new ideas, talking through things, but it's really bad for example, if you need to cover a very specific topic and that topic may be, skipped going off on other ideas and thinking of new ideas. So lastly, we're going to talk about semi-structured interviews. And a semi-structured interview is a great middle ground between our unstructured and structured interview techniques. Excuse me. Usually a mixture of predefined and spontaneous questions are asked. So while quantitative questions can still be answered using predefined questions, spontaneous questions can be great for reading the situation and asking specific questions, depending on the person you are interviewing. It's best to use great caution here. You want to ask questions depending on the situation you are in with a particular interviewee. Make sure to stay on topic and keep questions relevant to the main topic of your set predefined questions. Um, it's kind of hard. I mean, it's kind of easy to go off topic when you start asking those spontaneous questions. So it can be a helpful tool depending on the person you are interviewing, but try and keep it on topic. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Andrew now, and he's going to talk about how to interview.
Okay, so we just wanted to talk about a few more tips and tricks to make an interview successful um, when doing our software design specification. So as mentioned above, there are three main patterns of interviews: the structured, unstructured, and semi-structured interviews. And they can be done anywhere as long as they are speaking to the person live. So I don't have to necessarily be face to face with a person, just as long as I'm on the phone or Skyping or in person. One of those things so that I can actually have a conversation, ask follow up questions and things. And then another idea that we found from one of our sources is that we should give sample scenarios of the product that we want to show, so that we can get more clarity to the user, and they can talk about the things that they like and dislike, and suggestions that they have about that scenario. And lastly, you want to ask a diverse set of questions. So a good way to do this is to kind of think about the who, what, where, when, why, and how questions, and try to cover your bases there and have at least one of each. Next slide, please. So the upside of an interview has already been talked about a little bit, but really the main thing is that we're collecting qualitative data that really we don't have a ton of data that we're collecting because we're talking to just a few people really in depth, but that data becomes really rich and detailed. And the information that we get can be really useful because of these ideas that we get from the user. Next slide. Okay, so the downside is kind of along the same lines. Because we're getting this really in-depth data, it's taking a long time to talk to this one person. So kind of two scenarios in which case a interview would not be good is if you need a lot of data quickly, especially if you're looking at statistical data. Numerical data tends to not be very good for this particular situation. Next slide. Okay, so when should we use it? According to the table that we found, it basically covers really all of the main important points that we have as far as an interview goes. So the main reason that this is good for all these scenarios is because the data that you're getting is so rich and detailed and deep from the person that you're having a conversation with about the topic. Next slide. Okay, so lastly, this is the data that we collected. I had an unstructured interview with my wife where, first of all, unstructured interviews are really good. We really did. We were able to have a conversation and bounce ideas off of each other. And this is some of the suggestions that she had for our application. So first, she thought that we should have different age groups for the different user interfaces that we may have, because that way we can target multiple different audiences for, all the way from a 5-year-old kid wanting to learn about money to a teenager who's trying to manage their money. Second, we could have a debit card for the older kids so that they can actually spend money directly from the application and have it pull from that balance. She recommended that we have an educational materials tab, which I thought was a great idea. This would allow us to have we'd be able to learn about money as we go. So, I mean, obviously they're learning from their experience by using this app, but the whole purpose of the app is to learn about it. And so having those educational videos and articles would really be helpful in this particular scenario. And then lastly, kind of this cool idea of having the kids be able to accrue debt if they really want something really bad, so they can learn not only about the value of saving, but also the harms of getting into debt. Next slide. Okay, so just in conclusion to all the things that we've talked about, there's kind of 3 main points that we hit. First of all, the main types of interviews are structured, unstructured, and semi-structured interviews. And for the time that you want to use a interview is when you are looking for really good qualitative data. So that's when you want to use it. That's when it's good. And then it's bad if you're looking for quantitative data, when you want to not be deep. You just want to get lots of data from lots of people. So that's our interview and that's our presentation. Thank you, guys.